Hi and welcome everybody to the webinar. We're just going to give it 1 minute for people to join and then we'll get started. Okay, I'm going to make a start. Again, welcome everybody to today's webinar on data protection and cybersecurity. Today we're focusing on top tips for small home care providers. My name is Michelle Corrigan and I'm the Programme Director for Better Security, Better Care. If we can go on to the next slide, please, Marta. Okay, covering off all the boring technical stuff there. So just to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available afterwards. And today we're really focusing on issues for care providers who've never published a DSPT in the past. So we hope that that's you. Attendees are on mute and can't be seen. And we are asking, if you've got questions, please use the Q&A function. We'll answer as many questions as we can within the chat. Anything that can't be answered, we'll pick up at the end, or in the rare occasion that we can't pick up today, we'll come back to you with an answer. If you're on a phone, tap the screen to see any controls, and if you choose more, the Q&A function's available there. The webinar should only last an hour, and you'll get access to the recording and any presentation, including links afterwards. Okay, so the agenda for today. I'm going to start and I'm going to talk about why data protection and cybersecurity matters for home care. We've got the brilliant Katie Thorne from Digital Social Care talking about top tips. And Tom, one of our local support organisations from the Northeast, is going to be talking about the kind of support that's available to you. And then we're really happy to be joined by John Renison from First Home Care, who's going to talk about their experience as a provider. And again, at the very end, you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions that you haven't asked so far. Okay, now we've got a poll. That should pop up on your screen. If you can just answer that for us, because it's really helpful for us to be able to know who's coming here and where you're all coming from. Just going to give everyone a chance to complete that before we wrap it up. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So again, today we are talking about the DSPT and why that's important. So, an awful lot of you here haven't completed the DSPT, or you're not sure if your organisation has. And what's really useful for us is to know whereabouts you've come from, because then we can start to tailor our content and the things that we deliver. So thank you so much for that. Okay, now we're going to move into the content. So today I'm going to really kick off and we're going to talk about why data protection and security even matters, and particularly why it matters for you as home care providers. We'll start with a short video.
A cyber attack is any incident that you can face as an organisation or as an individual which affects any of your computerised systems that you have. This might also involve losing access to the data that you have in your organisation. The typical cyber attacks that we see in social care are phishing attacks, where you get spam emails or spoof emails which you click on a link and that can impact your systems. This also sometimes is a ransomware attack, where you get a pop-up, sort of like in the movies, which says all of your data has been encrypted, you need to pay this amount of money in Bitcoin to get access to your systems again. And unfortunately, we do still see attacks which are sort of from malicious former staff members or staff members who can change data within your systems, can lock out access. And those are the most common ones that we see in small organisations in social care. In terms of the impact this has on the care provider, Some of it can be really serious and it can impact both the organization in terms of financials. So for example, we've seen people thinking that they're sending an invoice to a client and actually sending money to a criminal gang, so all of that money is lost. We also can see this has a huge impact on staff. For example, we've seen a rostering system go down. This means you've lost access to all of your time and attendance records. It's very difficult to run payroll. Your staff information is potentially lost. And obviously from a morale point of view, but also financial impact on staff, that's really damaging. And some of the most serious attacks is obviously where this impacts on the people that we provide care to and who we're supporting. So for example, if you have a digital care record system and that is impacted, that has incredibly sensitive data about the people that we support. The data could be sold on the dark web, which can have a lot of impact on that individual. But also if you can't access care plans and care records, potentially harm could come to an individual. We don't know what medication to give. People in best instance may have to go back into hospital. And in the worst, there could be some really terrible outcomes that happen because of this.
If you have a cyber attack, as we have seen in some parts of the sector, unfortunately, it can result in your systems being down, not just for 24 hours, but for months. It has a very detrimental impact on your business. You know, if you have a data breach, you might have to report that to the Information Commissioner's office. You could be issued with an unlimited fine. It may put you out of business if you don't take this seriously, and the risk of cybercrime has gone right up. It's a very real and present danger, and everybody needs to be very alert and be prepared.
The Department of Health and Social Care is supporting cybersecurity within adult social care by publishing a cyber strategy for health and social care up until 2030. Within this, we make a commitment to continue funding and supporting the Better Security, Better Care programme, and we have a commitment to publish a market landscape review on adult social care, providing some insight into the cyber resilience of the social care sector, and a commitment to provide £15 million worth of funding following that landscape review.
We do understand that this area can be quite daunting. Most of us are not IT specialists, let alone cyber security specialists.
In order to reduce your risks of a cyber attack, the most important thing that I would say is staff training. I really recommend that all care providers complete the Data Security and Protection Toolkit. This is an online tool which is free, which has been created for social care. It asks you questions about your data protection and cybersecurity in an organisation. And it almost gives you a checklist of all of the things that you should be doing as a minimum. There's lots and lots of resources for this on the Digital Social Care website. This includes links to where you can train your staff, template policies, information about cybersecurity best practice.
Digital Social Care, Better Security, Better Care have a large number of free resources that are very good quality, and also there are local support organisations across the country, 28 in total, that you can go to with help to complete the data protection and security toolkit to do the best that you can to ensure that you're operating as safe an environment as possible.
There is so much benefit for care providers and for people using care in new technology. We as professionals and people working in care have to understand that when we're generating data, and we have to use that data responsibly. So there are certain things in place to help us understand that. There is support in this issue, so I don't want it to put people off using technology. I want it to actually say there's a richness we can create around the story of the person by knowing their data. The health systems and the care systems are working more closely together, and they can only do that if they are sharing data about us, about people who require health and care support. So by going digital, we can share this data a lot more responsibly and ease the path on what I call the care continuum for someone, so that their data can be used to give them the best quality of life as possible. For any care providers who are thinking of using new technology, I'd say try it. Don't be afraid. There's people you can come to help you on the journey, but technology can really change people's lives.
Well, the video has done most of my job for me, and I'm so happy to see some of my colleagues taking part and talking about all of their expertise. But I'm going to talk specifically now around why data and cybersecurity matters, and also a little bit why they're linked together. So we always come back to this idea. We call our program Better Security, Better Care, because data safety is client safety. If a person's data is secure, if that information is protected, it makes the care that we provide better. There is obviously a legal responsibility to protect data, and we have seen, we've certainly seen information where the ICO has had to be alerted that's caused problems for organizations, you know, legally speaking. There is an increased expectation and requirement for data sharing. There are also increased opportunities that affords us. It has real benefits to organizations to be able to understand what's going on with an individual that you're supporting in other parts of the system. But that does expose everybody in the system to new risks such as cyber attacks, and we are seeing an increase in them. One of the things people always think about with digital is that it's something that's coming down the line, it's something that's in the future, but actually it's the present. I can't think of a single organization that doesn't at least use internet banking, that doesn't have, you know, at the very least, a management team that uses email. So we are already using digital tools. There's just a spectrum of to what degree. And I think the more we embrace them and embrace them mindfully so that, you know, we're making that decision, at some point, an awful lot of the opportunities to not be digital will be lost because systems change and the requirements change. One of the really interesting things for us is that we're finding that people who take data and cybersecurity seriously, it is an indicator of good quality. So we did some data mapping last year, and those organizations who have been through and implemented the Data Security Protection Toolkit, the DSPT, are more likely to be those organizations who are good or outstanding. So if they take care seriously, they also take data and cyber seriously. And it's a regulatory requirement. You are expected by CQC to look after data. And we know that the DSPT is a way of you demonstrating that to CQC. I would probably foresee, looking into my crystal ball, that it'll become more regulatory. It's going to be, as the systems start to share more information outside of their own organizations, you're going to have to evidence more and more that you're doing that safely. And then why does it matter to home care particularly? So increased data loss risk is much more fundamentally problematic within home care. You do not have a single base. You have staff who are out and about. You are also accessing data in a more remote way. You've got more staff who are using their own devices, which makes it really important for you to understand how staff are using those devices when you're containing information, when they're recording information using them. There's an increased use of digital records because it's far easier to update a digital record on the move with a moving staff for moving workforce than it is a paper document. And it hugely benefits home care settings to be able to do that, but it needs to be managed safely. Keeping printed information is very difficult to keep secure in the field, and the stories we all hear from the ICO and CQC are things left in cars, on the roof of cars, on buses. The DSPT particularly is about paper data as much as it is digital data. And again, we keep talking about this, we know that the priorities are that we share more information with other organizations in people's kind of care. If we're going to share it, we want to make sure that we're doing it safely, and that's really important for home care because the quality of care that you can provide is hugely improved by being able to share information, but it has to be done safely. Again, we talk about information sharing all the time. These are just a few of the ways in which information is shared. So, you know, it may be your rostering system, it may be care management, EMR. It's also about those things that are more, you know, soft tools. So video calls, whether that's staff, families, video appointments with GPs are still happening. NHS Mail is a really useful tool if you're communicating directly with the NHS. We know GP Connect is used quite widely, and then there's a huge commitment in the policy documents coming out of social care for digital social care records adoption, so the DSCR, and there's funding attached to that. But to be able to access that funding, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're keeping information secure. Okay, so that's me finished up with why it's important. And now Katie's going to join us to talk about some of the top tips.
Thanks, Michelle, and hi, good morning, everybody. You're going to hear more from me, I'm afraid, after that video. So I'm just going to run through top tips, which are based on the most common questions that we receive as a program from home care providers when they're talking about cybersecurity. So probably the number one question that we're asked by home care specifically is very much around mobile devices and how this could be managed for staff. There is options as an organisation on whether you want to provide corporate-owned devices to your members of staff, or whether you can allow staff to use their own phones to access systems which your organisation is using, like rostering or care planning. We don't come down on one side of this. I think there's pros and cons to both options. Obviously, the most important pro for allowing staff to use their own devices is it's significantly more cost effective. And staff are already comfortable using their devices as well. So I don't know about anybody on this call, but personally, I use an Android smartphone. If someone hands me an iPhone, I don't have a clue at all how to use it. It's terrible. So when staff already know how to use the devices, that can be really helpful for them feeling more comfortable with using technology. Some of the cons for bring your own device, though, is that you do need to make sure that as an organisation, you have a really strong bring your own device policy, and that's something that you're actually enforcing within your service. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. And that's because you have less oversight about what your staff are doing. In corporate-owned phones, that's something which is much easier to do. You have a lot more oversight about how your staff are using their devices. You can limit access to certain applications, for example, and you can manage that yourself centrally. However, it costs a lot of money to provide all of your staff their own devices, and it might require quite a lot of technical expertise for you to sort of really be managing devices remotely. So we do see corporate-owned phones being much more common in residential care, where you can have staff who just pick up a phone on their shift when they're in the building and then leave at the end of the day. We don't see that as an option very often in home care, but I just wanted to say that is sometimes a possibility that some people are considering. So if you have decided that staff are allowed to use their own phones for work purposes, it's really important that you understand the legal landscape that you're operating in. The responsibility for protecting personal information of your clients and the people you're supporting lies with you as a data controller, as an organisation, not the individual device owner. So you do have a legal responsibility as a business to be protecting your clients' information. That means there is, however, provision within the Data Protection Act that employees have to take measures against unauthorised or unlawful processing of personal data. And we'd recommend that you have this in staff handbooks or in their contracts so they know what it is they need to be doing to protect client data. You can also look at the Employment Practices Codes, which says that employees do get a degree of privacy as part of work. So you can't just, for example, be looking through individual employees' personal devices and checking their messages and that sort of thing. So you need to really weigh up and make sure you're on the right side of employment law here, as well as data protection law. The Information Commissioner's Office, who are the regulator for data protection, have a lot of guidance on how to implement bring your own device policies and how to work through some of this with your staff. So there is free information out there, but just something to bear in mind when you're approaching this. If you are going to do bring your own devices and have a policy, a couple of things that you really need to think about. So the first thing to really, really get to grips with is what information your staff might have access to, what they might be sharing, and how they will be sharing it. For example, if you're using electronic care planning software or digital social care record, do you have a way of that data remaining within that specific application and not being sort of saved automatically onto somebody's phone? Do you have a log of who's accessing it with additional PIN numbers or password protection? And how are you sort of recording that as an organization so you know what data people are using? You also really need to think about social media. I'm sure all of you are aware of this. Social media can be an amazing tool for our organizations. It's a great way of connecting with the wider community. You really do need to think through, though, how you're asking clients to consent if they're going pictures or information is going to be on social media, and also to make sure that staff really know what your rules are about what they can and they can't post. Unfortunately, it's something that we see where sometimes staff aren't particularly clear and they think, oh, this is a nice picture, we'll put it on Facebook or on Instagram, but the family isn't happy with it or the individual client isn't happy with it, and that can be really difficult to navigate. So something to really consider. And finally, there's lots of apps which are out there. WhatsApp is probably one of the biggest one. If you're using WhatsApp to communicate with your staff, which is fine, we get asked that a lot, as long as you've got policies about messaging, that it's fine to use WhatsApp. WhatsApp, though, automatically is set up so that any photo that is sent through WhatsApp saves to your phone gallery. So it's not just contained within the app, it's also just in all of your normal photos and pictures. If you're sending information by picture format, which is quite sensitive, you need to make sure that that's not happening through WhatsApp, or that staff are asked to remove that functionality so that isn't happening. So everything can be contained in an encrypted format within an application. Next slide, please, Marta. If you're going to create a policy, there is a huge amount of information which is out there. The things that you need to think through when you're creating a BYOD policy is to think about all of the different types of devices and operating systems your staff are using. You should be able to know this. So, for example, if you're using like a rostering application, a payroll app, quite often these will only work on certain types of operating system or device. So you know your staff will be using that kind of smartphone. Nobody's managing to get a rostering app on a Nokia 3310, unfortunately, even if their battery life is much better. Once you know sort of what devices are out there, then think through about the potential impacts on your organization and the people you're supporting if any of this information went missing. For example, what happens if a member of staff lost their mobile phone and it didn't have a password on it and other people could access that information, or if their phone was stolen? And just work through what your contingency plans are for that and have a risk assessment. You can't stop accidents from happening, but at least if you have a policy and you've got it risk assessed, you know what to do as an organization, and it'll be much more helpful when these incidents occur. If you are going to do some kind of mobile device management on staff's phones, you need to think through who in your organization is going to be responsible for thinking about compliance with that, with maintaining licenses for mobile device management software, and how to ensure that it is actually installed correctly. I'm not saying you have to do this, it's quite an extreme option, but that's something that you really need to think through. And a big one for any kind of digital access system, not just on mobile phones, is what happens when staff change, if they leave or if they move to a new role, so they no longer need access to systems. How are you going to make sure that their access to applications are removed? How are you going to make sure that any data, for example, do they have lockbox codes which are possibly saved on their personal phone, which they no longer need if they're not employed by you anymore? How do you make sure that that's deleted and staff don't have access to that information anymore? You also should have, as part of your sort of policy documentation and what's happening in an incident, a way of staff to be able to report to you if their mobile phone is lost or has been stolen, and what you're going to do in this incident. This should be part of your business continuity planning. I would strongly, strongly recommend that you use specific applications, so a specific messaging software, a specific rostering software or care planning software, which is distinct from sort of personal device usage, so that everything is stored securely within the app. Basically, all of these apps have great cybersecurity anyway. It's part of their business plan. They can manage a lot of that for you. So think through how you're going to do that as an organization, and let these big companies take some of that burden from you. As a small home care provider, you don't need to be a technology expert. You can sort of say to the software companies you're using, what security is inbuilt in this, what auditing is already in there, and that can be a great help. And finally, think through your training requirements for staff. I'll cover this a little bit more. There's a lot of resources which are out there, but staff training is really fundamental, and making sure staff are really bought into the importance of taking this seriously as well. I mentioned mobile device management software already. What this does in a nutshell is it allows organizations to remotely have control over certain portions of somebody's phone. So you could do remote wipes of data, for example, or you can lock a phone down. It's really important that you really consider whether this actually would impact staff negatively, if they'd feel that they were too monitored, if they were being watched. And also if it just makes somebody's phone pretty inaccessible to use, that's just going to commit staff to not use the devices, to not want to be working there. So you do need to balance up whether the increased security is actually worth it from a staff functionality point of view. For example, I previously have worked in a job where we had to have a mobile device management software on our personal devices, and the software, which my employer held, would automatically wipe my entire phone if I put my PIN code in wrong 3 times. And I'm sure many people have accidentally put the wrong PIN in like 3 times. And so that was a constant fear for me and made me feel quite resentful, because I was like, oh no, how's my employer going to wipe my personal phone? So I think that's something you should really be considering about whether it's proportionate for the data that you're using. And this is why it's really important that you encourage sort of staff agreement to what you're doing. When staff understand the importance of keeping data safe and keeping data secure, they're much more likely to sort of buy into some of these technical controls. It means you're less likely to have staff doing workarounds to try and get around this sort of thing, and it reduces unsafe practice. You have to remember people use their personal devices very differently to a corporate device. So I'm much more likely to give my personal phone to, my friend's kid, for example, if they just want to play a game while we're out having coffee, or to let, a family member to borrow my phone to make a phone call. That sort of thing happens all of the time. It's really normal. You wouldn't do it with a business phone. That's again why you need to sort of think through what data people are having access to, and potentially having additional passwords and logins on the applications you're using to record client level data at the very least. Next slide, please. I know this isn't as common in home care, but I did just want to really quickly run through some things to think through as well. If you are considering buying mobile phones for some or all of your staff, most important one is the phone the right operating system for you to use all of the software that you need? So, for example, quite a lot of the care planning apps will only work either on an Apple iOS phone or on an Android phone. Don't spend a lot of money on devices which you then can't use the software that you're paying for on. It might seem like a simple thing, but we do see it come up quite often. So definitely double check with any software companies you're working with, what devices are appropriate for them. Also think through whether you have one user per device, and that is their device for the length of their contract, or if they're going to be there for office staff and they'll be shared between people throughout the day. If you have corporate owned devices, you should have a member of staff who is responsible for auditing that device. That includes making sure people are meeting policies, also removing access to devices if they leave or they move job role, and also sort of checking if they've gone missing or are lost, or if they're out of date and need repairing as well. And the final thing on corporate owned devices is, will you allow staff to use the phones for personal use as well? It can go either way. Some people say, yeah, if you want to use it to go on the internet, you've got staff training to do. Absolutely. Some organizations don't want that at all. And there are controls that you can put onto these devices to really limit how they can be used in that way. So I've already mentioned WhatsApp. We're offering your own devices now, but text messaging is something that I get asked all the time. And is it okay to be sending text messages, to be using WhatsApp, to be using Facebook Messenger, and all of this sort of thing? So what you need to really be thinking about is Who can see that message? As I've already mentioned, when somebody leaves, will they still have access to those message logs? And also really think through what happens if there's malware which is being sent. I'm sure everybody's got those dodgy text messages which come through, which say, you know, Royal Mail has your parcel and you just need to click here and put your bank details in to pay the fee so that you can access your device. And then it's not Royal Mail at all. They don't do that. It's somebody else, a criminal gang or something like that, a hacker, who you've then just given them all of their card details and bank account details. You need to think about that in terms of text messaging quite a lot. So there's a lot of advice which is available now through the National Cybersecurity Centre, which will tell you which apps they recommend and how to do it. But things to consider with text messaging is sort of how you limit the information you're sharing via text, but still sharing information which people need to do their jobs. Make sure whatever text messaging software that you're using, it's one which is registered as a secure one. It needs to have end-to-end encryption. All of the ones which do have this make a huge deal about it on their front page, so it's incredibly easy to find out about the encryption. Think through whether there is end-user verification. So does the text messaging app actually let you know that the person you're texting is who they say they are? Can you double check and make sure that it's not somebody masquerading as another member of staff? You need to make sure that the people who are receiving the information are the right people. A lot of these apps, especially the ones which have been developed specifically for health and care organizations, have password protection on them. You can have a secondary PIN, which I've already mentioned. Some of them allow you to remote wipe devices or the specific application. And some of them as well, you can put retention policies on as well. So you can say, oh, this will only be in the phone for 10 days, 60 days, for a year, and then all of the messages will be deleted. And that might be something you want to consider because you probably don't need year-old messages around specific clients, for example, in your phone. And if it can automatically wipe it, it makes it easier for staff and for yourself. Other really common things that we see coming up is around passwords. Get asked a lot of times about what passwords staff should be using on devices. It's really important that you consider strong passwords. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will be very happy to hear. We no longer recommend, and National Cybersecurity Centre don't recommend that you ask staff to change their passwords regularly. You know, when you get those pop-ups of it's been 30 days, please change your password again. You don't need to do that anymore. It encourages poor passwords and quite weak passwords because people just do, favorite football team 1, favorite football team 2. These are really easy to hack. They're not particularly good passwords. When the national guidance recommends you use 3 random words all linked together, these can be things which are very easy for you to remember, but they're difficult for computers to hack. So if you're doing a written password, 3 random words, and if it's a PIN password, so with numbers, we'd recommend doing 6 digits rather than 4 digits. Again, it's just more difficult for people to hack and access. For important accounts, and for this one, I'd say specifically email is one which I would really recommend both at work, but also in your personal lives. You should look at having 2-factor or multi-factor authentication. So you have an extra layer of security on your device or on your computer. I'm sure lots of you have seen this. It's kind of put on Facebook now, and quite a lot of email will make you do it, where you put in your password, but then also you'll have to look at your phone to allow access or to get an additional code just to prove that it's you. In the video at the beginning of this call, Jane Townsend talked about some of the cyber incidents which have been happening in home care and how people have been impacted because of this. This is why that we're now, as a programme, really recommending that all home care organisations have data and cybersecurity included in your business continuity plans. What will happen if you suddenly lost access to your systems, and how are you going to respond to that? And having this done in advance is only going to help in a crisis situation. It will help you manage risks, such as if you've got any data which has been lost, you can't access systems. if you've been hacked, what would happen if your phone operating systems went down, and also think through, you know, what happens if it's your software supplier who's had the incident and not yourself, and how to manage that entire process. We've developed with Oxford Brookes Institute of Public Care a template business continuity plan that you can use. It sort of runs through common scenarios and things that you might like to consider, and also gives you hints and tips on how you can test your business continuity plan so that you know it works before anything happens at all. Next slide, please. And I'm going to keep coming back to this, but the most common cause of a ransomware or a phishing incident isn't hacking. It's not somebody being malicious. Normally, it's just human error. You know, somebody accidentally puts in the wrong email and sends client data to the wrong person because they didn't double check it. Or you have somebody who clicks on that link in an email which looks really like it's right, but isn't at all. Human error is really the biggest risk that most small providers will have. We can't be perfect, but doing regular and routine staff training is going to be the best way that we can resolve this and kind of keep on top of it. We have, through the National Cybersecurity Centre, there is a lot of free cyber awareness training and materials which are relevant for both frontline staff, but also senior leaders at a board and director level, and people who have more IT access and maybe need more significant skills in this area. And we've also developed a manager's discussion tool and a quiz for staff, which is pretty short. It's very much focused around sort of real scenarios that staff will see in their day-to-day lives. It's something that you can use either as printouts or over the phone, or incorporate within your own e-learning systems if that's something that you're using. But it's completely free and available for you to use. And will also help you answer a question within the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, which asks that 95% of all staff are trained on data protection and cybersecurity. You can use this resource to help with answering that question, which we know is quite difficult for quite a lot of smaller organizations. Next slide, please. That's it from me. I'm now going to pass over to Tom, who's going to talk about some of the other support that we offer as a program. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Yes, I'm Tom Daly. I'm a regional coordinator in Northeastern Yorkshire. So we've been providing this service for the last couple of years, and just really want to run through some of the assistance that the local support organisations can provide with checking your data and cyber security arrangements and how you'll be able to access that support. So really delving into that cyber and data security element. So just to highlight that local support offer, so that's available across England at present. There's sort of 28 local support organisations which are commissioned through Digital Social Care to deliver a range of support to assist you with data and cyber security. So that's available across sort of 23, 24 years, so at least until March 2024. But really important that you sort of make use of that support while it's available. I think as Katie and others on the call have already alluded to, there's a lot of best practice solutions which are available to support you with that. So by that we mean sort of policies and procedures, business continuity plan templates, and a whole host of other resources which you can use, which meet those mandated standards and can be used within your organisation. So there's a link just at the bottom there, which provides you with access to those resources. Your local support organisation can also support you to find out which questions that applies to and how you can sort of change the culture of your organisation to reflect those mandated standards. There's also one-to-one mentoring to support you with that. So I think reflection that for you as home care organisations, the toolkit would look slightly different to how it might look for another sort of residential provider, for instance. So really the role of local support organisations is to provide that data and cyber security training and organisational change in a language that you understand, and you know, absolutely invaluable support, which has now helped a lot of the sector over the last sort of year or two. So in terms of how the toolkit's going to help you with those data and cyber security arrangements, I think it's always really important to look at, you know, what we're trying to protect, and really I guess it's the people that we care for fundamentally and their families. So, you know, keeping their data safe, making sure that it's shared appropriately and securely. I think really important that it is, you know, sharing is having a huge impact on sort of resident service user patient care. So again, there's always a need to share that information, but it's just making sure that it's done in a way that is appropriate for those whose data it belongs to. Again, for yourselves as an organisation, absolutely crucial. Michelle sort of alluded to, the ICO and how that, will come down if there is seen to be major gaps there in terms of protecting that information. So really important for you to protect your organisation, both in terms of from a regulatory perspective, but also from the fines that could occur from that, but also from a data breach. If you are subject to, let's say, a ransomware attack, and there isn't sort of a business continuity plan in place to support your organisation to be resilient in that instance, and that could have a ransom payment attached to it, and again the disruption as well. So if we've got a number of clients that we're looking after and the disruption affects our sort of rostering system, or it affects other areas of our business which leads to a disruption of that service, then ultimately that's a loss of income during that period of time. So worth thinking about how that has that sort of a knock-on impact on your organisation. And then finally, how it's really going to help you is that sort of guidance and practice. So it's a self-assessment. So really it's setting the standard for what your organisation can aim to achieve. But the more that you utilise that self-assessment, the better aligned that you will be with those standards. And the DSPT does update every year. So it's there to reflect any changes that may have happened in the data and cybersecurity space. So instead of having to go out looking for that information yourself, the toolkit will in effect do that for you. So as long as you're republishing every year, you will still have your answers, which will remain exactly the same. But it's really thinking about, okay, how has things changed within my organization? Are we using some new digital systems which might change the way that we respond to this self-assessment because there's potentially new risks that exist as a result of that? So really, having a forensic look at how your organization is operating and making sure that you've put sort of the appropriate measures in place to both keep up to date with the standards and to keep up to date with the changes within your organization. One element that I didn't mention in the previous slide is around sort of insurance. So, the DSPT isn't going to mean that in the event of a cyber attack, your insurance premium will pay out, but it will help you to show that you are taking the necessary steps in that eventuality. So according to the cyber claims report, the average cost of a claim for a small business owner was £115,000. So, it's generally quite an expensive exercise when you do go through that. And we are seeing that insurance claims are much more prevalent across the cybersecurity space than anything else. I mean, contents claims for insurance are, compared to cyber, are dwarfed nowadays. They're really a thing of the past. And insurance companies are often demanding that you take certain steps around cybersecurity. So that might be protecting against ransomware, which is particularly common at the moment. So really thinking about how that's going to support your organization in that eventuality. And I think something worth highlighting with sort of cyber incidents is, due to the sort of reputational damage, etc., sometimes these don't come to light. They might be kept under wraps by an organization, completely understandable. But I think that often leads to a bit of a misconception as to how often they occur, because they're not necessarily publicized unless an organization is willing to share their experiences to support others within sort of the home care sector. And something we've seen this year across that threat landscape. So within sort of my NHS role, we also are cited on sort of the threat intelligence, so the threat landscape across all organisations. And we've seen in particular, education has been a target this year. They sensed that there was some vulnerability there, and then the hacker groups are organised and they've then sort of targeted that sector in particular. So, worth bearing in mind that, if we can build a sort of operationally resilient home care sector as a whole, then that's going to protect not just your organisation, but other organisations offering similar services. So going back in terms of how the DSPT can help you with those sort of insurance companies. So again, it helps you to evidence that you are, taking the necessary steps to protect, as long as it's been sort of completed in a way that is effectively answering the question. It's not being audited. And some local support organisations may support you with with these sorts of elements, but it's not being audited. So it's really, you're going to get out of the DSPT what you put in. However, if you do sort of adhere to the standards that have been stipulated and you make the necessary changes to make your organisation more resilient, then that can lower premiums and payout and speed up those payouts if the worst were to happen. So it can demonstrate really how you're taking cyber security seriously, especially with the way that the threats are evolving at the moment. And as some of you may be aware, there is the sort of temporary viewer account on the DSPT. So, you could use that to demonstrate either to a regulator or another party who is potentially the insurer around how you've put these steps in place, which again could speed things up in that instance. So worth bearing in mind how you can use that toolkit functionality. And of course, there is also the breach reporting tool as well. So again, that triages your concern, not yet an incident, and then they will assess the severity of that against the standards out there. So you can really put that incident into the hands of professionals who can then let you know what the next steps that you need to take are. So really takes away some of the responsibility on your shoulders if you are in that event of a cyber incident. I think it's worth just sort of mentioning what underpins the DSPT. So I think Katie's alluded to some of the data protection legislation, like the Data Protection Act, which is of course absolutely key to it, but it does also have that social care specific slant as the other presenters have mentioned, but it's also looking at the National Data Guardian standards. So this is really breaking down what are the key components of what we need to address in order to reach these mandated standards. So I'm not going to go through all of them in a list there, but maybe to pick a few key ones out. I think staff responsibilities and training has been mentioned. When we're getting things like phishing emails that are coming to us internally, it's really important that staff are aware of their obligations and know what to look out for. IT protection, I think this is a really critical one, across the cyberspace at the moment, where we're using third parties or suppliers. We need to be assured, or at least have some information, that they are protecting our information and our systems in the correct way. Sometimes there's less security than we'd think. If we look at some of the high profile attacks that we have seen recently, I think there was Caries with Advanced, and there was also Appetito. I think some of you, I know this is mainly more for the wider care sector, but again, we've seen sort of various vulnerabilities and how that can have a knock-on impact on your home care organisation, and really how we respond to it. So I think there's two strands to cyber. There's the preventative, so the things that we can put in place which are going to hopefully prevent that attack from taking place in the first instance. So any key things around building that resilience. So in effect, putting additional locks on our doors within that cyberspace. Now there's always going to be a balancing act there, but it's something to consider how we can do that in an efficient way, both in terms of cost and investment of staff time. Appreciate, as smaller organizations, there's not necessarily the resource there to do everything, and there isn't in larger ones either, but also how we're going to react to a cyber attack. So there's always got to be that reactive element too. So I think, as Michelle mentioned, around continuity planning, how do we respond to incidents? If we're going to take things up to the next level, have we looked at how we would react within that scenario from an external point of view? So understanding some of these things is going to put us in a strong position to activate some of those contingency plans in that scenario. So really important to bear in mind all of these different areas, and this is what the toolkit effectively helps you to do. And this spelling out the complexity of a modern small organization. So I know there is a really broad spectrum in terms of the amount of digital systems that we're using out there at the moment. So it may just be that you've got sort of emails and mobile devices. You may have more business critical systems. So you're e-rostering, your digital social care record, which is providing that smart technology. It may be that you're using some additional sort of interoperable systems, and again, everything around your sort of staff, payroll, etc. Your network management, so the IT infrastructure that you have in place or you have via mobile device management potentially, and how you keep that safe. And again, the backup as well. So what servers are you using for backup? and what do you have backup servers, etc. Any plans if that goes down. So it really spells out how dependent we are on using these digital systems, and that's why it's important that we take the necessary steps to understand what risks are posed by our current organizational makeup, and what simple or potentially high value things can we do to really improve the way that our organization can react and improve the way that that architecture is formed at the present moment as well. So small organizations, big impact is this slide. So again, this is really asking the question of why are you going to put those already limited resources into preparing for and protecting against a cybersecurity attack. And again, as I've mentioned previously, it really is a balancing act. We could put as many sort of barriers or measures in place, but at infinite cost to protect against this sort of incident. So it's really about taking a sort of a common sense approach to getting everything to a level which is going to be reasonable, and then looking at areas of particular vulnerability and how we can support our organizations there. And again, if smaller organizations can be seen sometimes as easier targets because there isn't the same level of infrastructure there, so something to bear in mind. And also in terms of costs, so that, as I mentioned previously, that cost, looking at sort of around 115,000, that can threaten the viability of an organization potentially, especially if there's revenue additionally lost to services which can't be provided. And again, reputation, being the biggest one here. I guess the people that we care for and their families, there's a real sort of trust element to it there, and a trust that you're going to keep their information secure. So if you can show that you've taken those steps to protect that information, even if that attack does occur, it can't be mitigated all of the time, then the main thing is that you're able to show that we've put some really robust policies and processes in place within our organization to guard against it. And despite that happening, you've still been able to activate a business continuity plan, which means that things don't grind to a halt. So I think it'd be helpful just to run through some of the sort of cybersecurity threats that we see, just to give you a brief overview of what they are and how they've evolved, and potentially what we can do to mitigate them as well. So I think the first one is phishing attacks, and I think we've often thought of phishing attacks as simply an email which is sent, it's badly spelled, and it's often quite evident. And that, although that has been the case for many years, we are starting to see some changes within this space. So a phishing attack fundamentally involves trickery. So that's confidence manipulation. So it's making us believe that the sender is someone else, and then getting access to our systems or stealing our data. And I guess the thing to bear in mind with phishing is that it can affect the organization through one point of entry. So it could be any staff member that is particularly stressed or makes a slightly mindless mistake, and then they've breached and got entry to our system. So we see a few of the variants, and those include spear phishing. So that's really where there's background research been done around your organization. They maybe look at where you're located, who you're involved with on a day-to-day basis, and use that as part of the narrative for the trickery. Some of the other ones, I mean, these are quite new to me as well, with our cyber analyst has updated me on, but whaling, not one that I've ever come across before. But again, that's targeting high profile people because it knows that they've got a level of access which is going to give them that business critical access to those systems. Smishing, so that's the ones via SMS or text. So I think we've all received plenty of those in our personal lives, maybe less prevalent in the workplace, but also worth bearing in mind. And farming as well, so the fake websites. So sometimes we might be in a hurry to book something through a website or to order something, and they can masquerade as another more official website. And once we've entered those details, once again, they've breached and they've got access. And I think just bearing in mind that the advent of AI, sort of ChatGPT, etc., we are seeing a higher quality of phishing than we have previously, because there is in effect artificial intelligence often behind it as well. So ransomware. So again, this is probably the one we most commonly see, and that's why there's a real emphasis on protecting against it. So this is a type of software that once you sort of install it on your computer or you download it from an authorized link, it then requires a ransom to undo the damage. So Katie sort of mentioned it earlier that I think it was in the video as well, around the movie scene that you've often seen. You know, this thing does happen in terms of ransomware, and that ransom often needs to be paid in cryptocurrency. And something to consider, even if you pay the ransom, it really depends on who you're dealing with within that hacker group as to whether that data is restored or returned. It's not necessarily going to lead to your systems being back intact once that happens. So it is difficult to undo the damage. It's very dependent on the person, the assailant, and how they react. I think a great example of this was WannaCry back in 2017. I think we all remember when the NHS fully went down, and there was a huge knock-on effect. It was crippling banks, law enforcement agencies, and other infrastructure. So sometimes even the reach of it can extend beyond the initial target with ransomware. So something worth bearing in mind, that the systemic risk that is presented by some of these cyber incidents. So what we might consider hacking in the more generic term, so really just unauthorized access to systems and information. So this could happen by a number of different routes, and this is often to sort of steal either funds or intellectual property. We often see what's called a distributed denial of service attack. So this is where sort of servers flood your system, and that's how they gain entry in effect with a sort of brute force. So there are ways and means to guard against this. But it's quite common, especially with some of the sort of the Russian groups we see out there. And again, it's worth mentioning that sort of environment at the moment, that threat environment, there is sort of an increase due to some of the geopolitical sort of ramifications from Russia and Ukraine. So definitely an uptick in terms of those DDoS attacks. And then social engineering as well. So this is again a bit of trickery, someone masquerading as to what their true role is. It could be someone saying that they're an official from HMRC, etc. Or again, it could be some IT support where it's someone distant to you who you wouldn't necessarily know. But if they come across as official, or you might even have been expecting, you might have had problems with your Microsoft Teams or your Outlook, and you were expecting to receive some support, again, that can be the time when you would fall foul of social engineering. And really, it's playing a numbers game. It's thinking there will be some people out there that are expecting to hear from this organization or this institution. So we're going to spread the net wide in the hope that there will be some people who are tricked by this, probably quite logically because they were expecting it. So again, just underlining that it's important that staff within your organization do treat some of these things with suspicion. And it's often around that sense of urgency. So you're about to be fined £5,000, or if you don't answer this, you're going to lose your clients. It's looking to make you make that split-second decision, which is in this instance going to lead to sort of some detrimental impact. So again, important just to, if something doesn't look quite right, even if it might grab your attention, just to encourage that outlook that everything needs to be sort of assessed sort of prior to making any action. And especially over the phone, I think we do see especially vulnerable people really suffering from the social engineering method, because it's something that simply didn't exist before across institutions. So just in terms of risk management, so what we're looking at from a cyber point of view and what the toolkit is helping you to do and what the LSOs are helping you to achieve is around this matrix. So threat, asset and vulnerability is really what you're considering and how best to mitigate those risks. So you're identifying your assets through your information asset register, which is again something that your local support organizations can assist with, and sort of the record of processing activities. So how do you actually process that data or information? So again, it helps you to understand what are the most business critical things for you to protect with that limited resource. And again, I think this is just finally, but really underscoring the point that I was just making around looking at the likelihood of something happening and the impact that it has. So, you know, we want to protect all of our assets to a degree within the organization, but those that are business critical or that we simply couldn't run the service without, even though there might be a backup there, we really need to look at putting some additional safeguarding and protection in place to protect those. And again, we've also got the National Cyber Resilience Centres. So these are all at a local level. So we've included the national link here, but on the web page, you can also find access to your local business resilience centre. Now, this is a police-led non-for-profit cybersecurity centre. So they're in every region in England and Wales, and they offer a free membership, which is a core membership, which will keep you up to date on developments across this space and provide you with some useful guidance. Sometimes we also see the proceeds of crime are used to support organisations with free services. So I think there was a lot of pen testing, so external testing of your systems and resilience that was offered, I think, to 50 organisations in our local patch last year. So again, worth keeping in the loop there, because that could really help you to build that operational resilience. And the cyber attack helpline. So again, if you're in a reactive space, they can support you. And they can do a business risk check as well. So, you know, if you do want to double down on understanding your organization and its vulnerabilities, then that can also provide some really useful support, as well as the DSPT. So I think this is really for that reactive space and any other elements of up-to-date guidance. And then just finally, a reminder in terms of what the local support organizations can offer. So there's bespoke workshops and webinars offered to assist you with delivery. You know, there can be demonstrations of the toolkit, so what good looks like with regards to how you evidence that DSPT self-assessment. And as I mentioned previously, the sort of one-to-one support that's available. So there's the Better Security, Better Care page there with the LSOs listed. Again, you can reach out to us directly if you're unsure as to who your local support organisation is. Really worth making the most of this offer, which can help you to build up that operational resilience within your organisation and to support its continued viability. And again, an additional link to the resources through digital social care. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand over to John Rennison.
Morning all. My name is John Rennison. I'm the CEO of First Home Care, and I'm also Director and Treasurer of the Home Care Association. We've got 3 offices in Oxfordshire, Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, and we run a live-in service as well. And over the last few years, we've gradually moved over to digital in pretty much every sense. We send out digital invoices to clients. We bring in, we receive most of our purchase invoices digitally. We pay digitally. All our care records are digital. Our rota is prepared digitally. And our account system is digital. And quite interesting, if I look around our office now and look at the types of security measures we had in place for our paper world, which would be a locked filing cabinet, a locked room in a locked office, a burglar alarm, a webcam, a fire alarm, and a shredding system, pretty much all of that is redundant now. And if someone were to come into my office today and steal everything, I'm looking around, the only paper I can see, might be exaggerating slightly, is some Christmas wrapping paper left over from last year's Christmas wrapping. Okay, so my old measures are no longer in place, and I need something else to protect my client data. My client data is no longer kept in a paper form. So I would urge all of you who are probably some way along a digital journey that we need to look at some way of replacing these old world security measures with the new world security measures. And this is what DSPT does. So I tried DSPT about a year ago, and it is quite a slog, and I kind of lost the will to live last year. But this year I had another crack at it and did get through it. And some of the compelling reasons that changed this year, I think, you're probably all aware of, nobody's named names so far, but one of the rota planning software companies that had a ransomware attack was called Staff Plan, and I'm sure lots of you have heard of that. But that was a massive issue. and it's not just a loss of data for a day or two, as someone else said earlier. This affected people's businesses right across the country for several months at a time. And I think various people were being asked to work weekends, various people left their company because they just couldn't stand the stress of it all. And many local authorities, so while some might have been quite forgiving and said, yes, okay, just bill us on estimate, other local authorities said, no, we don't pay on estimate, we're only going to pay on actuals. And if these care providers couldn't provide actuals in the absence of their rota planning software, the local authorities are saying, we're not going to pay you. So some of these care providers were at risk of going out of business. I'm not sure if any did go out of business, but it was a massive, massive cash flow operation threatening the viability of many care providers. So if that's not a compelling reason to get your data security right, I don't really know what is. There are other benefits to DSPT, not just a sort of an internal checklist. It's something that you can use as a selling tool to talk to your private clients and say, we will protect your client data, and this is how we're going to do it. Another major thing is that there is grant funding available for care planning software provided by Digital Social Care, but you can only get that if you have DSPT certification. So I don't think that's been mentioned today, but that's something that we've taken advantage of. We're just moving on to some more care planning or some newer care planning software, and we've managed to get some funding for that. In terms of getting the DSPT finished off, which, as I said, is not an easy task, but a very worthwhile one, the local care provider associations are what's called the LSOs, local service organizations, is that right? Anyway, they were absolutely very, very helpful to me for me to get this finished off. And we've got 3 offices. So what they were able to do is when I'd finished for one office, they were able to help me migrate my responses to my other 2 offices so that I could get certification across my three businesses, because we do manage all 3 businesses in the same way. So it was perfectly valid to sort of copy my answers over from one office to my other 3. I think those are the main points I wanted to say. Really, I think DSPT it is a checklist that helps you work out whether or not you are addressing all the digital issues that are out there. So I thoroughly recommend it to everyone if you haven't already started that journey. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John, and thanks for that contribution. I think the points that you raise are really valid. These are live issues that everyone's dealing with, and we can't ignore that. So that's all of our panelists today, and I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's contributed. We've got an opportunity now for any questions. As you know, you are all muted, so if you can use the Q&A box. I know the team have been answering questions feverishly in the background. Steph, are there any questions that have not been answered yet?
Yeah, there's one question that's come through that I think might be for Katie. Someone's asked, is it acceptable to have staff WhatsApp groups to share sensitive information?
Great question. The short answer is yes, that's fine, as long as you're really mindful, as I said, about having a policy for this. So making sure all of the staff within that group have a reason to see that information, that you know who they are. I would limit the amount of information to what they need. So if you can use somebody's initials, for example, pseudonymize their information, that'd be better rather than full names. Skills for Care have written quite a significant piece of guidance on using WhatsApp groups. I will get that posted in the chat for you. But yes, as long as you have a policy and that's being followed, absolutely fine.
Thanks, Katie. I can see someone just asked, what if part of your business is located abroad? Now, cyber is one of the few things, certainly in social care, that is a global issue, and the threats are global. Most of the bad actors in the sector in cyber typically are outside of the country. The advice we would give is that you should be following the best practice guidance wherever you're based. So, you know, in terms of what you can do in the UK to protect yourself. We've got all of that information available on digital social care, and all of the DSPT kind of advice and what that advises you to do would be the best practice here. You should check wherever the rest of your business is located. If they have something more specific, if the legislation is different, whatever types of regulation you might be under in those cases. It probably is the case that things will be slightly different, but the disconnect, the overall question is just disconnected. In short, what I would say is check wherever you're based for the best practice. So whether it's, following what we advise here, do that. If there are differences, do it whatever's advised in the country where you're also based. Okay, well, we don't seem to have any other questions. Okay, so you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I did. Just to add a little bit to the abroad question, just to be mindful that there are legal restrictions about sharing data outside of the European Economic Area as well. So I don't know where you're based, but you need to be quite cautious if your abroad is outside of that region.
Great, thank you for that, Katie. That's a really good point. I hadn't even considered that might be outside the EU. Yeah, I think you would probably need to seek more specific advice just to make sure that you are doing everything correctly. Again, through the ICO, okay, well, the ICO will be the best place to get that advice. Okay, if there are no other questions at the moment, and again, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's contributed to the webinar today. All of the links and the slides will be made available to you, as will. Oh, have we got that? Carol Harker's come back with a question. Okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry, just there are a couple of questions coming through, but they're repeats of previous ones. Thank you to everybody for today. All of the information will be made available to you. If you do have any further questions, there is a way to contact us via the website. So thank you again, and good luck with your endeavours in the DSPT. Please do get in touch with your local support organisation who'll be able to help you with anything more specific.